This week on Security Weekly News, episode number 3. Can you believe that? It's already episode number 3, just like that. This week, Tesla goes all pwn to own again this year. GRU hacks a Ukrainian gas company. Microsoft has officially ended support for Windows 7. As of today. And a nasty bug in Firefox. Citrix exploits are being well exploited. And the return of Emotet. In the expert commentary, as always, we welcome Jason Woods of Paladin Security to talk about the state of 5G security, which is a big thing. So stay tuned for this episode of Security Weekly News.
This is Security Weekly. For security professionals, by security professionals.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week. Your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for Security Weekly News. Make sure your team is prepared to fight off the latest cybersecurity threat. IT Pro TV is the resource to keep you and your IT team skills up to date. You can stream IT Pro TV courses live and on demand, so there's no need to send staff to off-site training. Team subscriptions include Pro Portal, so managers have full control over your team's training schedule. Go to itpro.tv/hack-naked and use the code HN30 to try it free for 7 days and receive 30% off your monthly membership. The question is simple. Have any of the systems on my network been compromised? The answer is harder than it should be. Enter AI Hunter. Active Countermeasures has automated and streamlined techniques used by the best pen testers and threat hunters in the industry to create AI Hunter, a network threat hunting solution that does the first pass of a hunt for you to identify systems that are most likely to be compromised and scores the results on a scale from 0 to 100. You can then research those systems in depth with AI Hunter. Focus your valuable time on the systems that need your expertise with AI Hunter. Sign up for a personal demo today at securityweekly.com/ACM.
Hello, this is the Security Weekly News for the week of 12 January 2020 already, and I'm your host, Doug Waite. Our next webcast is January 15th, which happens to be tomorrow, with Cecilia Mariner, RSAC Program Director, Innovation and Scholars, where we will discuss RSAC Sandbox, RSAC Innovation Sandbox, RSAC Launchpad, RSAC Security Scholar, and their how-to seminar for innovators and entrepreneurs. Wow, that's a lot of syllables in that little blurb. Register for these upcoming webcasts by visiting securityweekly.com, selecting the webcast drop-down from the top menu bar, and clicking, wait for it, registration. So let's get on to the news. All right. Well, I couldn't resist leading with this one. Tesla returns to the pwn to own competition this year. They bring a bug bounty to Teslas once again. They did this last year, and they offered a Tesla 3 and some cash for finding vulnerabilities in the vehicle. I guess this time there are more prizes. And if you can claim the top prize, you get a Model 3 and some fat stacks of cash, as well as additional options, which it said could bring the whole total prize package up to around $700,000 US, which sounds like they're pretty confident nobody's going to actually win. But maybe I guess Tesla can afford. Elon Musk can give you $700,000 worth of cash and prizes, right? And you get a Model 3 to drive around and some extra money to pay for whatever else you have to pay for with it. The event will be at CANSEC West, 18 to 20 March. So if you really want to get involved in that, head out. If you'd rather just skip all that and donate a Tesla X to me, I'll thank you on the air, and I can send you the address. So, call me, and we'll talk about that on the side. All right. Second up, Russian spies, GRU, hacked a Ukrainian gas company, which was a breaking news story last night because I had already started putting stories together and I saw this thing pop up. So apparently the Russian GRU hackers, if you don't know who they are, this was the group that was allegedly involved in hacking U.S. elections in 2016. They've allegedly been involved in this, that, and the other thing. Apparently they took, I'm going to put air quotes around everything, took out Burisma Holdings, which is a Ukrainian gas company. And they used a sophisticated collection of fake websites basically got people at the Ukrainian gas company to log into those websites, which of course allowed them to essentially credential stuff the site. So I don't know if I would call this hacking, but basically this company, this Burisma, and we're not going to get into the politics of it, but Burisma is the company that is also centered on the scandals in Washington, the impeachment hearings in Washington, and apparently Hunter Biden, the son of now presidential candidate Joe Biden, apparently was on their board. So there's all these like weird connections. I would say it's not going to be long on this one before the Illuminati show up and we start reading about it on QAnon. But basically at this point, there were not a lot of details on this, but it sounded like a credential stuffing attack. No one has yet found out exactly what they were after, but apparently they got into this system and were doing something to it. So very, very vague breaking news story with that. At the same time, in Iran, protests had broken out all over the place, apparently due to Iranian government acknowledging that they accidentally, I won't do any more air quotes, I promise, Iranian government accidentally or unintentionally or whatever they said, downing a jetliner. This was last week when all that happened, but the security story on this was quite interesting to me. A lot of social media services were showing outages in and around specific areas where protests were taking place. So this was kind of interesting to me in terms of how that is shaping up in modern society. I have no doubt that governments and police agencies have actually started talking about this kind of thing to control and or support social media, other types of media in times of trouble, whether it's a natural disaster or it's a protest or it's violence or whatever it is. And I'm sure that especially more autocratic, we'll try to use nice words, autocratic governments like Iran probably have taken more direct action on this to shut down social media. Apparently, social media like WhatsApp and Instagram and so forth were being used by protesters to organize protests. We've certainly seen this kind of thing in Hong Kong. Haven't seen any stories yet from Hong Kong that they were suppressing this, but you know, pretty much everything's suppressed there. Iran already has an ironclad grip. Let's try that word. Ironclad grip on pretty much all the internet services in Iran. So it's probably not that big of a leap to think, well, why don't we maybe start shutting some of this stuff down to prevent people from doing this? But the good news for free speech advocates, of course, is that this gets harder and harder to control all the time without it being very, very, very obvious in the world. So, you know, I think you're going to see more of those kind of things, but at the same time, there's certainly apps to get around that. So you'll see protesters and people using other encrypted applications and other things that get on. Malwarebytes released a story basically saying that the United States government had bought cell phones, Android cell phones, that they were going to issue to low-income citizens in the United States. The phones were manufactured in China. The model number is UMX U686CL, and it basically came with pre-installed malware that is firmware-based, I presume, and basically they were issuing these phones. So this thing was a variant of AdUps, which is a piece of malware which can allow remote users after the fact to install apps on your phone, as well as, wait for it again, this app actually reports back with texts, location data, usage data, and all kinds of other, fun to have information to a Chinese server. This is certainly not the first time we've seen this kind of thing happening. It's certainly not the first time we've seen trouble with some sort of Android phone, especially ones that were being manufactured in China. Although I guess all of them are really manufactured in China. But I don't think it's going to be the last time we're going to see this sort of thing either. All right. As of today, some sad or happy news. I don't know. Maybe it's probably happy news. Microsoft will officially be ending support and updates for Windows 7 and Server 2008. Now, for all of you still using Windows XP, this doesn't matter. If you're still using Windows NT on your servers, especially Windows NT 4.0, everyone's favorite version, again, it doesn't affect you. And just like Windows XP and Windows NT, you can still keep using these products. They didn't turn them off. But what you will not see is, of course, any support and or updates going forward for these products. So there'll be no further patches. This is an end-of-life thing. And it's always a tough decision for users to upgrade. I know I have the same problem. You've got something, it's stable, you're using it, and you really don't want to go through that whole arduous process of upgrading. If you're an enterprise and you've got thousands of screens and thousands of users and thousands of videos that you've prepared to train your users on how to do everything, and all your staff has been trained to do it, and they come back and say, well, we got to get rid of this. But everybody's known this was coming for a while. Honestly, using end-of-life software is usually a pretty bad idea. If any new exploits come out, not only are they not going to advertise them, but they're not going to do anything about it either. So then you may end up in that horrible situation of trying to upgrade when something really bad pops up in a couple of years and you're still running that. And plus, we'll all be making fun of you 10 years from now when you're still running Windows 7 or you're still running Windows XP, and there are people still doing that. A bug in Firefox popped up. This bug was allowing people to take over your computer remotely. Multiple stories about this came out this week. This is a JavaScript bug, and it basically allows someone to execute a type of man-in-the-middle attack, which would allow you to run this malware via a website app. Who 360 found the flaw in DHS, and the Department of Homeland Security issued warnings about it. So if you're not patched up, you need to. This is patchable, and so you should definitely jump in there. A Citrix application delivery controller and Citrix gateways vulnerability in the Citrix application delivery controller, which was called NetScaler, if you're familiar with that, has been identified, and there's no patches expected before the end of the month. So this thing can result in all kinds of problems and, again, man-in-the-middle attacks on that particular controller. There are workarounds listed from Citrix, so if you have not done these, please get out there and do something about it before somebody takes a harsh approach to you. This next story was kind of an interesting one to me, and a little weird. This one is basically that a major Brazilian, listen to this headline, a major Brazilian bank tests homomorphic encryption on financial data. And wow, this is a fairly interesting thing if you don't know what it means. What it means is that they were running a trial via IBM with, I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. You can look it up in the show notes if you want to. But basically what it means is taking machine learning and looking at encrypted data that is not being decrypted. So remember, if a bank wants to look at your data to do an analysis to try to provide some kind of information or to assess you, like a credit score or all these kind of things that machine learning is used very heavily in financials for, they have to decrypt the data. Well, the minute you decrypt data, that means the data is laying around somewhere, and then it might actually get exploited. So here's the interesting part. This machine learning, and this was a trial, so it was not put into play, but this machine learning was able to simply analyze the encrypted data. And by looking at the way the encrypted data changed, they were actually able to start predicting outcomes from it. So this, to me, is a pretty interesting thing because I don't know exactly what the implications of this are. I don't know if it means we can do other kind of predictions based on encrypted data, or maybe it means that eventually we won't even care if it's encrypted or not because we can make predictions based on it if we have a large enough data set. But it's a very interesting thing to read about if you're interested in encryption and things of that nature. The top CISA vulnerabilities this week were primarily focused around CISCO, and I didn't do. I've got a link to all of them, but I just did the one that had the most hits. CISCO Data Center. There was a whole stack of CVEs from CVE 2019-15 975 all the way up to 82, and then 84 and 85, and all those are listed on the wiki. So if you want to check those out, if you're running CISCO Data Center. All these were pretty significant vulnerabilities, which resulted in both injections, authentication bypass, remote code execution, you name it. So you really probably should, if you're running Cisco Data Center, check out all those CVEs. And there was another Cisco Linksys vulnerability this time, CVE 2013-5122, that came out for routers. And again, I put all the router numbers on the wiki so you can check that out. All of those vulnerabilities allow a TCP port to open on the outside of that router, which would allow straight up unauthenticated access. So if you have one of those routers I listed on the wiki, you really should go check those out and make sure that you either have patches or that you've blocked access to that kind of stuff. In Georgia, another lawsuit. Last week we reported on a lawsuit that was filed against an unknown anonymous ransomware company and a ISP for ransomware. This week, another a fairly interesting court case for security professionals in Georgia. This one is a long-standing litigation over a data breach. And this breach occurred, I think, back in 2016. It went to court. People sued for damages, saying that because they had a data breach that they potentially could suffer identity theft, and they wanted some, remuneration for this. Apparently, in the case, the dark overlord stole. I love it when this stuff goes to trial, because you have to just sit back and imagine these judges going, "Oh, is the dark overlord present in the room? Anybody? Dark overlord, please." But apparently the dark overlord stole personal information from this orthopedic clinic, and people were trying to get remuneration for this. Well, they were denied this because to get money, you have to actually show that damages occurred, and there's all this legalese about it if you want to read. And of course, they lost. They appealed this decision, and again, they lost, and then they appealed it to the Georgia Supreme Court. The Supreme Court in Georgia overturned the finding that they could not receive damages because they had not actually had identity theft occur. That was the sort of test in those other cases, was that you couldn't just say it might occur, it actually had to occur, and then you had to show that you had suffered for it. But the Supreme Court said that since the dark overlord specifically stole this data to sell on the dark web. So this is this all new enterprise world of dark actions and black hat hacking. Because the intent was to sell it, that damages could very well be obtained. The case is still not resolved. All these civil litigations go on for years and years and years and years. Any of us that have worked on civil litigations that know that you get these cases that are really, really old. But basically what happened in this case was they said, in this particular case, so don't get your hopes up on every single data breach, but in this particular case, that because the data was stolen with the intention of selling it, rather than it just happened to get sold or it happened to get distributed, that in this case, there could actually be damage to the plaintiffs for that particular case. Finally, this week, it wouldn't be a week of news without malware. My last two little stories on this. Emotet resurfaced. So the all-new and improved Emotet is back. Emotet has moved even further into the framework world of being enterprise malware. So, you're seeing that. And, of course, it resurged right after the holidays because, as you might expect, people went back to work and they started clicking on links again. As we see these types of frameworks get more and more prevalent in the world, you're going to see more and more problems with this very stuff. And there was also a nice commentary by Ravid Leib that was on Dark Reading about what he called servitization of the dark web, which is the ability to actually sell services and black hat for hire type things. And his article was titled, "This Will Be the Year of the Branded Cyber Criminal," which I found to be quite interested. Finally, Nemty ransomware has a new approach to this same kind of servitization. They started saying, if you don't pay up, and Maze is doing this as well, they actually, before they encrypt your data, they upload all of it to a command and control server, and then they sit back and they start leaking it just a little bit at a time. So if you don't pay up, they release something. Don't pay up for another day, they release something else, and they just sort of slowly leak all your data out onto the internet, trying to encourage you to pay the ransom. So again, this is more of this kind of servitization stuff that we've really started seeing a lot of. And with that, we will take a short break and be back with expert commentary on 5G security with Jason Wood.
As technology continues to evolve and expand, so have the countless ways our critical systems can be put in jeopardy. Ransomware attacks, misconfiguration, user error, and malicious threat actors, to name a few. As IT infrastructures continue to grow and diversify, how do you ensure stable security? Core Security, a help systems company, provides an analytics-driven, layered approach to security with a portfolio that enables both proactive and reactive responses. With Core Security, you can reduce risk by limiting access, detect upcoming and active threats, test for security weaknesses, and efficiently monitor data for actionable insights. To learn more, visit securityweekly.com/core security.
Welcome back to Security Weekly News. We welcome the soothing tunes of Jason Wood, founder of Paladin Security, to talk about the state of 5G security. Jason, welcome aboard.
Hey, Doug. It's good as always to be here with you and everybody else. I heard it my speaking termed as soothing terms before, so that was new. So now that Doug has spent some time talking about all things that are in our face right now this week, Emotet, Citrix, various other exploits that are currently occurring, I actually focused in on something that is a little bit more in the future and upcoming to us. I say a little bit more because, well, 5G is being deployed by folks like Verizon and T-Mobile and AT&T, but our devices, for the most part, don't support it. That's just on the core side of things. But as I was reading this week, I ran into this blog post that was released today by Bruce Schneier about the state of 5G security and his opinions on it, and issues or that he has with how it is being implemented and rolled out. And he's really explaining why he feels that 5G security is probably not going to be as secure as we all hope. Now, most of the time when I see articles on 5G security, they're talking about, oh my goodness, this is terrible. We can't have Chinese-made hardware or infrastructure components rolled out into 5G networking. The U.S., for example, is strongly against using companies like Huawei and other Chinese networking suppliers to roll out into 5G infrastructure. The fear is, of course, these companies are going to include backdoors and deliberate security weaknesses or other things due to pressure or just outright collaboration with the Chinese government. And due to China's history on content monitoring and censoring and espionage and stuff like that, that's a risk to consider. They definitely could have a vested interest in that, and that's where the data is flowing, is over the network. So are they overblown or underplayed? Well, I suppose that depends on who you're talking to. Everybody has their own experiences and biases when we talk about things like this. But rather than focusing on that, he made mention of it. He pivoted to a few things that I did think were interesting for us to think about. One of the things he made the comment, 5G security is going to be weak because 5G standards are just really complex. And that makes it, in his opinion, basically impossible to implement securely. If you've ever been able to fall asleep at night and decided to read an RFC to help you doze off, you know that standards lay out requirements. They stay pretty high level. They don't get into how you actually do something and how they really interact with each other or play off of each other. They are subject to interpretation by those implementing them. And that's why we run into interesting issues that crop up in a technology with one vendor but not another. They interpreted something in the RFC differently and implemented it differently. Because of this complexity, he's basically saying security errors are still going to be made while writing the implementation and configuring it. That's no surprise to anybody, I think. He said this is further complicated, though, because 5G is not strictly just the wireless communication, but actually lays out how the infrastructure itself is communicating with those core components as it passes data around the world. So we're not dealing with just a wireless standard, which we might think when we hear 5G. We're dealing with the infrastructure components as well. It's not apparently as simple as handing it off to a router somewhere and using traditional networking. Second, Bruce points out that even if 5G was super secure, it still has all of the baggage of 4G networking because of backwards compatibility. And I laughed the other day because I was driving through Salt Lake City area, and there's a billboard up there by T-Mobile saying, "Hey, we've rolled 5G out to Salt Lake City." And I'm looking at my phone and thinking, well, that's nice. It doesn't really matter. My phone doesn't support it. It's still just 4G. And so that's obvious. We're going to have this move slowly over to 5G as we replace devices and things like that. And so we're going to have all of the security issues we had with 4G still in 5G networking. So maybe some kind of downgrade attack would be possible. You put up a device that pretends to be an access point, but it tries to downgrade a device down to 4G so they can get access to something or some weakness that would be present there. So yeah, expecting a clean break is obvious, as he termed it, is unrealistic. We're going to have to live with those security flaws for a while. And finally, and this was kind of a little funny here in some ways to me, but he points out that the standards committees just skipped out on opportunities to make improvements inside of 5G security at all. They just looked at different things and decided to leave it alone, or if they did put some things in there, most of it is optional requirements that the manufacturers actually have to meet. So, if they look at something and they decide that something is too expensive, or there's a performance hit, or it's just going to take too long, or whatever, they can skip it and move on. They don't have to include that feature. It's optional. And he also cited some instances where in 4G, even though something was marked as required, the manufacturer skipped it anyway, and we all just kind of lived with it. So it's not like somebody's going to prevent you from putting a device up for sale if it doesn't meet every single specification or standard inside of the specification. So, there's definitely a lot here that, we can see that they've talked about 5G security having 5G having security improvements, and it's going to be fast, and it's going to do all kinds of fun stuff. But, there are some glaring issues here. Now, he did make one statement that I thought almost sounded a little bit silly, because it applies rather to every technology or implementation out there in IT or in technology. And I'll quote this one. He says, "But even worse for 5G, development, performance, cost, and time to market were all prioritized over security, which was treated as an afterthought," end quote. Well, yeah, that's pretty much the case most of the time. And it always ends up causing us problems. That's where, our entire field exists, because security is thought about after the fact, and our job is to come in and try and deal with it and make things work somewhat better and prevent incidents and things like that from occurring and data being compromised or leaked out. Obviously, we have work to do on that because we're not doing so well at that frequently. I don't think Bruce is being naive with this statement, though. I think, which is what I first thought. I think it's most likely his lament about the state of it, and it kind of goes back to his call that he has put out a number of times for government regulation and security mandates for IoT. And if you read articles about IoT, particular upcoming technologies and devices, they're talking about the need to have 5G to make all of this IoT stuff work really well, which means I suppose that we're going to be getting data plans for our refrigerators and our appliances and stuff like that, if that is the case. One bit of advice I really liked in this post was actually a quote from Susan Gordon, who at the time was the U.S. Principal Deputy Director of National Intelligence. There's a job title. And she makes the comment, you have to presume a dirty network. In fact, she goes on to say, that's what we're going to have to presume about the world as a whole. So while we may agree with that sentiment as security professionals, because we are aware of the issues with implementation, configuration, and what the threat actors are out there doing, it certainly makes for a messy landscape and a rough experience for those who don't work in security. They don't think about this. They just expect it to be secure. The vendors are going to do the right thing, and that's really not the case. The overall takeaway is this: 5G security is not going to solve all of our wireless security woes. It will definitely change things, but it's not going to be a silver bullet or some kind of solution for this. There's some enhancements that we'll get That'll be great, but we're going to still have other issues that will crop up that, come with the new standard and implementation. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this actually plays out. A lot of predictions out there. I've seen blog posts talking about this is going to be the year of IoT 5G Armageddon and things like that for security. But certainly it's going to be interesting to see how this rolls out and see how, as these IoT devices reach deeper into our lives, what can happen with them.
And there you have it. You know who else didn't protect their borders? The ancient Romans. Look what happened to them. So you don't see any Roman networks out there right now. But yeah, so 5G-ageddon is it's a good marketing term. The capitalist in me, of course, always says the market will punish those who don't meet the needs of their consumers. But I don't know if that will be true either. Thanks, Jason Wood, for that. Finally, President Donald Trump said that and this is a direct quote, the U.S. is better at cyber than anyone else in the world. In an interview on the 9th of January, he said, cyber is a whole thing. It's a whole new field. We have some tremendous people. We're better at cyber than anybody else in the world. So apparently it must be true. But thanks to Jason Wood for that talk about 5G security, which is a little bit scary, and you definitely need a data plan for your refrigerator if you don't have one already. I mean, come on. And I'm Doug White. Tune in on Friday for Security Weekly News Wrap-Up, and we'll see you then. Bye.